We're psyched to have Nada Stirratt here from Verve Mobile. Is it just Verve or Verve Mobile? Is it
Verve Mobile.
Verve Mobile? You started at Verve about 18 months ago. Tell me a little bit about kind of what that's been like and what have been some of the big challenges that you've been facing there.
Sure. So first of all, as you can imagine, 18 months has completely flown by so quickly. It has been the most successful year in the company's history. We're 11 years old. We just finished our biggest third quarter, and Q4 is about to surpass that pretty significantly. So the momentum at the top line is really great. We're profitable. We raised $30 million earlier in the year and invested it in the areas that make the most sense for our business. And so primarily in the platform, and we have a lot of platform partners out here, whereby we private label a mobile location platform so that they have the richest opportunity to be able to serve hyperlocal advertising to all of their SMBs. We've done a lot in the area of creative because no matter how good you are in data, if your creative message does not engage the consumer, then it's pretty much a waste. And then lastly, we believe strongly that the entire mobile ecosystem, and certainly at the hyperlocal level, is going to go into closed loop or measurement attribution, and therefore to be able to have the richness of data and the ability to both analyze and provide insights on that total loop is really important. And so that's how we've been investing on our platform.
Cool. So, since we started Street Fight, the kind of mobile technology, and, someone earlier said that every year was the year of mobile for a while, but has, sort of come to fruition or finally come to fruition at this point. There's been a lot of sort of evolution in the technology, and I was wondering, do you think marketers are sort of getting up to speed in, being on board with mobile and programmatic and, location as a marker?
Yeah, and so I think you're right, and it's the year of mobile has been around about a decade in the making, and again, we've been in the business mobile only for 11 years. I think there's a couple things that have happened. Number one is the proliferation of mobile devices. I mean, we really are at almost full saturation point. So marketers have started to really understand the behavior the consumer has with that device and how to capitalize on that. And we recently did a study called Mobile Prodigies, and it's for 15-year-olds and higher, because it's the first time you've got this entire generation that does not know a world without a mobile device. And there's a tremendous scale and buying power, but a tremendous demand if you've got something this personal on how you treat data, how you treat location information, how you treat push messaging versus voluntary messaging. So there's a whole ecosystem that's been built around that. But I believe that marketers, this is probably 2 years now running, that marketers have really created mobile as its own marketing bucket.
And do they understand sort of the data aspects of it? I guess one of the questions we often used to, or one of the things we'd often hear from brands and marketers was, that they're getting so much data and they're so excited about big data, but then they get all the data and they don't know what to do with it and don't know how to analyze it. Do you feel like people are coming more up to speed in that?
So it's so before Verve, I was at Acxiom, and it's one of the largest database management companies in the world. And so you run these huge data systems for some of the biggest companies in the world. And interestingly enough, those systems and the people who run those systems have always reported into the CTO or the CIO, sometimes procurement, that area. And I would say over the last year or two, you've started to see a lot more of that responsibility roll under the CMO. What that does mean, to the second part of your question, though, is that it becomes a people problem. It's not a systems problem. You can always find people who can figure out the system. But how do you really know how to take from this really, really messy hairball of a problem and extract the right insights and the right analytics in order to then direct a different kind of an outcome? So that's the holy grail on the marketing side. And I think that there's still some work to be done on both the people skills as well as understanding what to do with the data.
Is the data itself getting better? I mean, one sort of issue that we've heard a lot over the years is that the problem of dirty data or bad location data out there. Is the data still that bad? And is it a problem? And how does it filter into the marketing, I guess?
So it's messy. I wouldn't say whether it's good or bad, and I'll give you an example. So for us, location precision is really important because our entire business is based on getting location, and knowing where a consumer is incredibly important. So we care about how accurate location data is. And to give you an idea of the picture, so we see 130,000 apps because we serve advertising on apps. So in real time, we see 130,000 apps, and we score them for location accuracy first and foremost. We have a lot of IP around that. Of the 130,000 apps, 28,000 have accurate location. So you have to go through a lot of messy, ugly location information, or in some cases non-existent location information, to get 28,000 quality location. Now that's an enormous problem to solve for, because you're ingesting 130,000. So we're seeing, several trillion impressions a month in order to be able to get access to the really core quality location data. So it is still a very, very messy problem to solve for.
So what do you do with all of the rest of the, did you say 130 million, or like?
So a lot of that is, quite frankly, from all the exchanges, and so that it speaks to where the exchange data and the quality of the impression that you're getting from an exchange is just not the same. Significantly more than half of our inventory that we use for our marketers are either apps that we build and power ourselves, or our SDK is in those publishers. And so we have a lot of news, weather, and sports partners that go down to the hyper-local level, because then it makes the targeting a little bit tighter, because you're already dealing with a smaller DMA or a smaller zip code. But it's absolutely important to have that level of specificity on location, or else the whole thing kind of falls apart.
So what are some sort of interesting ways that you're seeing companies use location data, or particularly like brands or agencies and that kind of thing?
So I would say that virtually every single advertiser that we have, of the thousands, are using data in really interesting ways. Here's one that we just finished recently. It's an upscale retailer, a jewelry retailer, and they wanted to participate in New York Fashion Week, because that's their sweet spot. It's extremely expensive to sponsor something at New York Fashion Week, and that they didn't want to bust the budget, and so we created a gate crashing program. And to think about specificity, it's New York City only, geofencing only where the fashion shows are, so it's not a whole Manhattan thing, geofencing the restaurants where all the parties are, and then building it. It's a database of only several thousand people. This is not multi-million people databases. And then serving them ads in the time that makes the most sense for them to be receptive to that. Beautiful creative. We had almost 22 seconds of time spent with the creative, and then the retailer comparing this New York Fashion Week with last year's New York Fashion Week told us that they had 5% increase in sales during that time. So at the end of the day, it's about driving people into stores to transact and then prove that it worked, and that targeting was really important.
And once you build an audience like that, like around these geofences, can that be stored in, like, does the retailer then sort of have access to that same sort of group?
So the retailer does not, because we don't give our data away, or we don't give our data, or when we don't sell our data like that. However, we have several hundred personas or audience segments that retailers and CPGs and auto tend to draw to, and everything is specific as a particular type of a store shopper, so that you can do some conquesting or some loyalty programs. QSR fans, and so therefore we've got a great database of most of the QSRs around the country. It's a big part of our business.
Cool. I guess, sort of going back to this question from before, what are some of the sort of like nuanced ways that marketers are starting to use, or are starting to sort of like use location data? I guess you had the one example, but
Yeah, so I would say, so there are a couple things. It depends on, so two things that have to go hand in hand on the nuanced way of using data. So number one is, there are actually three buckets. The first bucket is people are still using, to some extent, location data as if it's a direct response vehicle. And I see you sitting in New York City, and I'm going to serve you a text message, or I'm going to serve you an ad because I know you're in New York City. For some marketers, that works, and that's I would say the baby step. The second step is, how do you aggregate all of these different type of location signals to then provide a very rich portrait of you as a consumer? That's the New York Fashion Week. It's a luxury fashionista. And so that becomes an audience that you save and later target as you need to. I would say the third bucket of location, and it's one of the key drivers of why we bought a mobile wallet company, Fosbury, and we bought Roximity, which is a beacon company, is how do you get as absolutely close to the point of sale without having to worry about POS systems, credit cards, and PII. And for us, on our hypothesis, it's through wallet activations as well as through beacon activations. And so knowing that you were in a store for multiple minutes, hours, however you spent your time, we get a really rich profile of the type of shopper that you are. And then we can see the customer journey to see what led you to get to that point. And so those are 3 different buckets of how location data is being used. And I say a lot more of the world is moving towards that third piece, and where mobile will play a much bigger role in measurement and attribution because you have your device with you all day long.
Is there a reason you don't want to sort of go through the POS system as well, or is that just another kind
There's not a consistent POS system from retailer to retailer, so it'd be a very expensive. First of all, it's not going to be our. I want us to be very focused, and what we do really well is create this platform for marketers to find consumers in the right way and drive them into stores for them. So that's not going to be core to our business, but there's also some inconsistencies, and you're also dealing with the type of data storage and the type of data problems to worry about that we don't even want to get into that. Kind of messy.
So we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to throw to the audience for a question or two. Anybody out there? Or I could keep going. Yeah, I guess.
I would say that is one of the single biggest questions that marketers should be asking. And people think that because you've got the data right and you've got location right, that you're of course going to have a really great outcome. We invested considerably. We created a group called the Foundry, and it's half developers and half designers. And their entire business model there is to be able to create the richest experiences. And we call them memorable, magical moments for consumers, because again, you've got this incredibly personal device. So you have to be making sure that your creative message so mirrors both the time, the place, and the mindset of that consumer. At the end of the day, you are here to sell something to the consumer, but you want them to really be responsive to it. And another example we did, we just won a creative award from the IAA for a British ginger beer called Krabby's. High-end, expensive price point, only sold in a couple of doors in Washington, D.C. and Raleigh-Durham as the 2 test markets. And so not only do we have to do hyper-local targeting for those particular areas where they're being sold, you need to be over 21 and you need to be a young professional and have a high disposable income. So it was a very specific niche. However, the creative piece of it for that particular audience was the most important thing. And we had almost 30 seconds of involvement with each creative unit. And those stores represented an 86% increase in footfall. And when you look at any of the studies, it's the engagement that you have with that creative that becomes what the driver is for that relationship that we have with that brand. And that's one of the other things that I would say is it's going to get messy, because with the level of specificity and the information that you have, the diversity of creative and the ability to be able to optimize on the fly is not a trivial problem. And so therefore, that makes the case for agencies and other intermediaries to help marketers solve that problem. And that's the reason why we created Foundry.
Cool. How big a problem are ad blockers for you guys? I mean, do you feel
yes, and so by the way, that's the answer for creative. It's if you have these rich creative experiences and consumers are spending 25 to 30 seconds on it, it means they probably don't want to block it. On that Mobile Prodigy study that we did, all of them are aware of ad blockers and location permissions, and they turn them on and off strategically. So they don't turn off ad blockers for their favorite sites because they want to make sure that they're seeing ads from their favorite brands. They also don't turn off location services because they know they can get a special offer as they're walking in a particular store. And so there's this behavior, and I think that's going to be the norm. The new norm is going to be that people are going to turn these things off as they feel like it, because they're going to have the control for it. And it's up to marketers and it's up to providers like us, A, to make sure that everything is targeted, and B, that to make sure that that creative is really compelling.
Cool. So do we have one more question from the audience?
Yeah, that's correct. And so beacons they're everywhere. However, our SDK in our publishers' apps or in our partners' apps are what read that beacon signal based on the location of that beacon.
Of the industry going? How will we all, because there's so many different partners you can choose between for the beacon technology, every single SMB is going to have a different beacon provider.
Yeah.
As a publisher, how do I show attribution when they're all using different things?
And so you're right. That's actually not a trivial problem to solve for either. And so for us, we acquired Roximity. We made a whole bunch of decisions on why we went with Roximity. Some of it's from their partners, some of it's their capabilities, and some of it is for their battery life. But so we have the ability through our SDK. We also have a big partnership with Gimbal, and we work with a lot of the partners. You're going to have to look at it on a case-by-case basis from an SDK, but we've developed our SDK to be able to draw beacon signals from a whole host of partners, because I agree with you, there's going to be a lot of consolidation, and we want to make sure that we can read all of them, because we want to be agnostic to a point.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Nada, and please give her a round of applause.
Thank you very much.